Hello!
Whoa!
Hi, everybody. How are you tonight?
I'm great, Pete. How are you?
I guess I don't know why I was still getting my stuff together, so I thought I would get a response when I said that, and I forgot that this is a medium where we just talk at a world, and they cannot speak to us except through chat. And I see a lot of you commenting in chat. Hello. I see hi Shiva, hi Luminieron, hello Frog. Hello everyone else who has not yet commented but is hanging out.
Yeah, we got some stuff to talk about just before we even jump into tonight's episode of DnDTime Talks. First, I just want to point out, awesome map. Luminarian posted a cool their rendition of the lands of D&D time. I know D Forgotten One has done one as well, and a few other people throughout the time have created their own renditions. But we really dig that, and it's kind of inspired us. So what we're probably going to do is we're going to sketch out the quote-unquote canon layout, right? And maybe we'll have not a competition, but like a friendly call for art, so that we can have a page on the website that just showcases everyone's maps of D&D time.
And what y'all think the place looks like.
Yeah, because that'd be so cool. Also, congratulations, you Forgotten One, on getting your Dollbound race approved on D&D Beyond. It's pretty cool. I just actually finished up reading it while we were waiting to start up here. Not bad. I especially like the little mending one and the precise movement on that last sub race. But anywho, that's not what we're talking about right now. We're as much as we'd love to talk about it. We love you guys.
The thing that we are talking about is going to be another in our series of Monsters in 5th edition. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about the Undead. And I say that because I think Undead have a very kind of vibe to them. I guess the ghost in particular.
They can also have a very
yes, a lot of Undead also have that kind of vibe. And we're going to go over all of those different vibes that Undead can have pretty shortly.
For those unfamiliar with the show, DnDTime Talks is a weekly talk show where Pete and I discuss all things Dungeons & Dragons. We're in the midst right now, as Pete mentioned, a series covering the different types of monsters you're going to find in 5th edition D&D. And so, yeah, like we were saying, we're on Undead now. It's going to be really exciting. It's not if you have opinions. We know you have opinions out there, chat. Feel free to let us know. Give us a little type in chat. We'll be watching the whole time and commenting on what you're saying as we go. So join in on the conversation and let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about in a future episode here. So should we dive in, Pete?
Yeah, let's get into it. We're gonna have a lot to talk about today, as Undead is. Yeah, it's a pretty wide category. There are so many Undead that do different things, but over the course of today's discussion, we're going to be talking about what specifically an Undead is, when and how you can use them in your game, and we're going to go over a few specific ones to kind of give good examples of what Undeads to use in which situations, and just some that we personally like and we think are really interesting to use in our games.
Yeah. So obviously Undead are kind of the most iconic monsters that exist in popular culture. They've existed. Yeah, I mean, they're a major thing in cinema, in film or television. Zombies, skeletons, ghosts, vampires, all these creatures are undead. They're really easy to use in games. Like, it's easy to just throw in undead, but and they can be used across all sorts of levels of the game. But there's a lot of nuance you can give to them to really make them an interesting plot point for your players to engage with as a dungeon master. And as a player, there's something that you can have your character form very intense kind of opinions on, that it's a little easier to rationalize than, my character really hates oozes. Why? Whereas if your character really hates undead, that's a little less of a question. There's a lot more moral and idealistic kind of rationale behind it. But it's pretty rad.
Very nuanced. They're a very nuanced kind of category of monster. There's a lot going on in undead. But yes, so as we break them down, with this whole monster series, obviously it's a little bit more geared towards DMs, but also, we always try and make things interesting, and there's never, as a player, learning more about the game and how it's run and what these monsters do is always good as a player too. So without further ado, let's hop in. You want to take it, or do you want me to start off, Jeremy?
I mean, yeah, I'll start with Undead. I'll start off basically the basic essence. What is an Undead? So,
indeed,
Undead are a subcategory of monsters here in 5e. They're a lot more straightforward than the other classifications we've discussed so far. We've talked about aberrations, we've talked about monstrosities, which don't have as much of a core definition as Undead. Where Undead are very cut and dry, they're super straightforward. An undead creature has died and has been brought back to life by necromantic negative energy, magics, or whatever you want to say. Undeath isn't like a true life. These creatures aren't just people who've been resurrected. These are creatures that their fundamental essence has been altered. Maybe they don't have a soul and they're just a soulless, hollow creature. Maybe they are nothing but a soul twisted and in anguish over why it has died. And yeah, it's just interesting. In Undeath, something is always given up. It's a bit of that creature's, whether it be sentience, ability, or physical form, or just their humanity. An Undead has lost its humanity, is really what it boils down to.
That's kind of the key thing, is once something has become undead, it is imperfect. It is not what it was in life in some way or another, which is actually, like Jeremy was saying, it's a lot more simple and grounded of a concept than the things that we talk about, like monstrosities, which is a thing we both loved. Those are huge in their scope. Like, a monstrosity is just a catch-all for things that are monsters and that are strange and that kind of exist in the wilderness. Undead, you know exactly what you're getting into, which is one of the reasons why Undead are great. But we're going to talk about a whole bunch of those. And the first of those, and we've touched on this a little bit already as well, but Undead are very complex. They are a nuanced, extremely nuanced thing to play. Because Undead, well, they used to be alive, which means if you're fighting a zombie, just flash off the bat, this is the most kind of simple example. If you're fighting a zombie, then you're fighting, let's say, a human that was killed and has now been brought back to life. And even if the soul is gone, the body is still there. And there's some kind of moral questions that are brought up just by this act. Like, you're looking at someone who used to have life, and even though they've been twisted into a monster now, you still have to question, like, is there anything left of them within? Is this right for me to be doing? And another thing about Undead is, when you're running Undead, there's always a question as to why it is that they exist. Undead don't just kind of randomly crop up. It's never a case of someone dies and then they just happen to get turned into a zombie when they fall. No, it's either there's some kind of strange force or more powerful undead that is raising them, some kind of necromancer. There is something that is going on that is causing these undead to exist.
Yeah, and I mean, undead can take tons of different forms. An undead could be something as simple as just a shambling body that was risen by that necromancer, or an undead could be the soul of a mother slain by orcs and grieving for her child who has been taken. Right? A creature that just cannot be laid to rest because their business is not yet finished in this world. Which is also added to the complexity is undead aren't objectively evil. They aren't necessarily evil. And that's a huge thing that you can play with. Like, when players run into the ghost of a grieving mother, that's a little different than if you run into a mindless zombie wandering in a graveyard, right? One, you cut down because it's an abomination. The other one, there's a very deep, like, moral conundrum, right? To struggle with and for players to deal with, which is just a really fun way to play. Figuring out why these undead are coming up, why things are happening, why the undead exists is a huge part of the fun. of playing with undead. You know, undead are haunting a house. Why? Right? They don't just haunt random houses. There's a reason they're there. And discovering that, exploring that kind of question is...
that's the fun.
Yeah, exactly. That is, in my opinion, the single greatest thing about undead in a game.
That's the juice, so to speak, with undead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I also agree with Jeremy there. It's really satisfying to kind of build on these really simple creatures and create that underlying story behind them. Another great thing about undead, and this kind of, I guess, fits into a similar category, and this is also actually true about the other things that we've talked about so far, monsters and aberrations, or monstrosities and aberrations, is that they aren't in particularly tied down by the lore of the creatures. They are lore agnostic, is the term that we've been using, and that's just great. We've talked about this at length, so we won't go too deep on it here, but it's fun as a GM to be able to decide why the undead exist in your world, to be able to figure out where they go, where they fit into the greater story. There's all different, there could be any answer to that question, and your answer that you choose as a GM is always going to be right. Whether one time it's a necromancer, next town over there are restless spirits, or maybe it's just magic that's just left in the air and kind of flitting about. It's always going to be it's always a good idea to throw in undead and to just use whatever you think is best for them, and they work well in that way.
Exactly. Whereas something like, even as abstract as a beholder, it has some otherworldly origin. Undead are from your plane. Like, they were things that were alive. And so why they came back is a playground. You can do anything, which is awesome. Another interesting thing about Undead is they provide an interesting tactical nuance to the game, which is totally contrary to almost every other monster type. Fiends and Fae, you could argue there are some tactics for. Lycanthropes, there's like a minimal tactic strategy kind of ideal for. But Undead have a lot of tactics to them. They have a lot of special abilities to like keep them from dying, for example, which are just really interesting. They can possess characters if it's like a ghost, which is great. There's a lot of visibility deal that goes along with Undead. They have snowball mechanics where, like, if a character goes down and is killed by the undead, that character might rise as an undead to now fight you.
Which is also so dramatic.
Oh yeah, a lot of very intense nuance that you can use with undead, but that also gives you a potential to make a major error, right? Because there's a strategy, there are these tactics, there's this nuance, but it doesn't mean anything if the players don't understand it. If your players don't get that there's some sort of strategic nuance going on, and they just get rolled over because they don't get it, then it's bad. And so we'll talk about that later when we talk about one creature in particular.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's just very important to note that you can do a lot of really cool stuff. I mean, vampires have specific vulnerabilities. It's just awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, the flip side of that coin is, like, aside from the cool things that Undead can do, the players also, just because of their historical knowledge of, like, just what undead are, also have cool things that they can do. For example, dragging a ghost or like a wraith or something out into the light, out into the daytime. They can, figure out different ways of exposing some of these creatures of the night to sunlight, because most people historically know that these creatures do not thrive in the sun. And then the players get this opportunity to feel like really savvy and cool. They get to feel like a monster hunter in this world without you having to do anything, because they thought of this plan, and they used it to gain some kind of advantage against this foe. It allows a little bit of extra planning, a little bit like some of the monstrosities of Legend do. But these, I think, are even more widely known, like solutions for them. Things like creating circles of salt for ghosts, and stabbing vampires with wooden stakes, and just stuff along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, the last kind of deal that really makes Undead so important and stand out, I think, to be our third choice here. And really, we probably should have done Undead before Aberrations, but whatever. They make excellent villains.
Both.
Because Undead can be as dumb as a literal mindless shambling corpse, or as intelligent as a super powerful wizard who has turned himself into a lich. Like, you can make Undead incredibly intelligent, and because of their kind of inherent malevolence that is usually associated with Undead, the kind of corruption, they make great enemies that are just truly evil. They aren't necessarily out to get more power. They might be, but they aren't necessarily out to get more power. They could just be out to destroy, to kill, to torment. Like, I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, the inherent loss of humanity gives you a lot of creative leeway to.
Yeah, and that's like that lore agnosticism. It's you get to decide how much humanity they've lost. That is entirely for you to decide behind the screen. Like, this lich is completely insane and is just kind of wreaking destruction, or maybe the lich is actually retained almost all of their humanity, and they're working for some greater good. Even that's just entirely up to you, which is great and fun and awesome. That's it. It's just good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, even like an enemy that's doing like a lich, right? That has preserved its life. It is undead. It is what many characters would see as an abomination. And it's out there just killing people throughout the countryside. Why is it doing that? Well, maybe it's doing that for a reason. Maybe it's killing people so that the people don't bother the ancient dragon that will level the entire country, right? There are cool ways that you can give this nuance to the character.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Let's talk about. Oh, sorry.
Well, I wanted to say a couple of things. One, Luminieron asked in chat, "Is it possible to befriend an undead?" Yeah, absolutely. It just depends on the campaign, and I guess these particular undead and the whims of your game master. And then D Forgotten said, "Everyone is just a basic magic user, and then there's that cleric that wants to kill them all," which is another really good point about undead, in that D&D has a lot of mechanics that are specifically built around undead and kind of unholy creatures. A whole class, really.
I mean, to a degree.
Yeah.
And the quintessential one being the cleric.
Yes.
But the paladin also gets these abilities, specific features that interact with undead. These take the form of their channel divinity abilities. These are core class features they get almost immediately when they get their class. I think they get them at level 2. And they're generally incredibly powerful abilities that disrupt the undead.
Really, really strong.
To play a game with a... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, essentially the way it works is clerics have a chance of, as they level up, they use their channel divinity. It's called Turn Undead. If they're high level up against low level undead, if they fail the saving throw against it, undead of a certain challenge rating or lower instantly die. So you have a mob of 100 skeletons. The cleric uses their channel. The high level cleric uses their channel divinity, and then in one instant, they just are wiped off the face of the map. The more powerful ones. Oh yeah. Go ahead, Jeremy. Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
Oh no, I was just saying it's very satisfying. I mean, really, if you got a player who's playing with that cleric and playing that paladin, and I'm specifically going to focus on the cleric here. They want at some point in the game, even though it's going to make the fight a cakewalk, they want to be able to use that channel divinity and just destroy like 20 zombies that are converging upon them. They want to just die, creatures of the night, and the beam of light destroys everything. If you're a dungeon master and you've got a cleric playing in your party, you're doing them a disservice if you don't give them that opportunity at least once during the campaign. Assuming it's a relatively long form thing. Because that's the dream. That's what you want.
The cleric
to do.
dream. Oh man.
It just feels good.
I've
It feels real good.
never done it before. I've never turned any undead.
I've had it happen.
That's fair enough. And paladins are in kind of a similar vein. Not all types of paladins, I think, get the ability to turn undead, but some do, and it just falls under the same lines. It's not quite as powerful as the clerics, but it's still pretty radical. And that's not the only. Yeah, same general idea. And clerics and paladins aren't even the only thing that interacts with undead. There's necromancers. There's several different things within D&D. There's the necromancer school of wizard. Some actually clerics also get these abilities. There's miscellaneous things. I'm sure I'm going to forget one here or there, so I won't mention any of them that allow you to create various undead servants. And there's a ton of stuff that you can do there as well. Like if your players are actively creating and summoning undead, putting undead against these kind of players raises a lot of interesting role-playing opportunities, a lot of storytelling chances. So if you're running into a necromancer and then there's a bunch of undead attacking the town, one, maybe they're just trying to take control over the zombies, which is an awesome encounter. And two, maybe they don't like that there's someone else raising undead in this area, or maybe the creature that's raising the undead doesn't like that your player is doing so. And there's just a lot of potential for story there. So if all of these player abilities that interact specifically with this monster type, sometimes you kind of gotta throw some undead in for these types of characters.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned it, but I love the idea of a party where the party face is a necromancer wizard, and they raise the undead, and this party just kind of goes around doing their things, and they come across this other necromancer, and their undead battle, and the necromancer versus the party character, it just becomes almost like a chess match. Like the evil necromancer who's raising his undead minions views the party necromancer almost with respect, my contemporary. Yes, let our minions do battle, and then we can entreat. It's just a cool way where you take this villainous character, and because the party is also tampering in the same deal, they kind of are in the same game, and it's neat, that kind of opportunity that opens.
Yeah, very cool. I got really excited just thinking about running something like that in my game as you were talking about it, Jeremy.
Pete, I'm an inspiring person.
I mean, I won't say that isn't true. And also, if you just look through Wizards wants you to use undead. You look through the monster or the Dungeon Master's Guide, you're going to see a bunch of magic items that are specifically tailored to fighting undead. There's holy water as part of the basic equipment in the player's handbook. They want you to use this stuff against undead. They want DMs to use undead. That's all I got on that subject. So you will probably be shanghaied into using undead at some point, no matter what. And when you do, there's lots of stuff that you can do with them. So the most kind of basic form of undead is they make great minions. Like we're saying, if you have a powerful character, undead's terrorizing a town, going anywhere. They're perfect minions. A lot of times they're cannon fodder, which we'll talk about when we get into some of the more specific undeads, which undeads make great cannon fodder. But not a lot to say on that particular category, but they work great as lower level servants of higher, more powerful characters.
Yeah, and the best thing about undead is there are so many of them. You can use them throughout every challenge rating in the game. From a level 1 all the way through level 20, you can have undead being the main villain. You could run a full 20 level campaign using just undead. And part of the reason for that is A, there are tons of unique undead. But also B, any creature can be an undead. In the book, they provide an example in the form of the Death Tyrant, which is an undead beholder. But you can do that with any creature in the game. You see a Tyrannosaurus Rex and say, yes, an undead T-Rex. For those who are familiar with Tomb of Annihilation, undead T-Rex.
Oh, they do that?
Spoiler, sorry. You can take literally anything. You could take giants. Yes, this is an undead giant now. Undead storm giant. And it's pretty easy to just pack a couple features on and make any creature a zombie. which we'll probably talk about at some point in the feed.
Yeah,
because that would just be sick. Sit down and chat.
Probably we'll talk about that pretty soon, I think.
How soon?
Maybe we'll be talking about that a little bit on the upcoming Sunday on DnDTime Brews.
Wait, we're going to be creating creatures on DnDTime Brews?
Who could say really for sure? But maybe anything's possible if you set your mind to it. That's aside the point. Jeremy, do you want to start talking about just some specifics?
Yeah, we're getting real caught up in the nuance here, but let's chat about some of our favorite monsters, our favorite undead. So our first category is kind of the Hollow Men. They're zombies, skeletons. There are some higher level versions like ghasts or ghouls, wights. Well, wights are a little less so, but ghasts, ghouls, zombies, skeletons of all kinds. These are just creatures that are soulless bodies that have been animated and are alive. The core premise is they're controlled by some greater power. And there are a lot of things about them that make them fantastic enemies. Pete, what's your favorite thing to do? I know you want to talk about these skelly man, so please.
I love skeletons so much. Skeletons in every single game I've ever played in my entire life. Skeletons are my favorite thing to kill. They're so fun to beat up. In video games, when you run across a skeleton, you just know they're gonna die in one hit and crumble and make like that satisfying bone rattling sound when you hit them. And then, like when you actually fight them, even in D&D, when I encounter a skeleton, just thinking about them like crumpling when you hit them and making that like fun bone rattly sound, and then it's like really easy because they're just made of bones and the sword just kind of goes through. I even feel really just fulfilled doing that in my imagination. And like they're so easy to kill. They make you feel like you're strong and good at adventuring and amazing. I love killing skeletons. They're just so good to beat up. That's it.
I completely agree. And additionally, they make really good enemies for like dungeons, right? If you have a dungeon, you fill them with skeletons. Those skeletons could be adventurers that have gotten lost in the dungeon and died. And one of the things I particularly like in dungeon crawls, right? Parties go, they're exploring, they're killing the monsters along the way, getting deeper into the dungeon, and they say, oh, you know what? Let's take a long rest. But we don't want to go all the way out of the dungeon, so we're going to stop here. We've killed everything behind us. We know that they're dead. We killed them. We're good. And then the skeletons come back together. Skeletons are enemies you can literally have respawn.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like out of the...
Totally reasonable.
Yeah.
Like, without any DM bullshit, you can just do that. And it's amazing. They bar the door ahead of them. They're like, nothing's coming back up. Nothing's coming out of the dungeon toward us. And then from behind them, where they thought they'd cleared everything, click.
They battle.
Clack. Click.
The same
clack.
Skeletons again.
And
Biology says, Jangle Bones, Philip Q. Jangle Bones, attorney at law, Esquire. That's a skeleton from DnDTime, if y'all are familiar. I love skeletons. I can't help but use them in everything I do. And zombies and ghasts and ghouls fall into the same category, where they make just great kind of fodder to beat up, knock around, ghasts and ghouls being slightly higher level fodder. But
I mean, they're hard to kill at early levels. They make great enemies at lower levels. But later in the game, even so, they're still good. Ghouls, especially, even at higher levels, are scary.
Yeah, ghouls have like a move. Ghouls have their paralyzing touch. Is that what it's called?
It's not called paralyzing, but it's
a paralyzing touch.
It is a paralyzing touch indeed.
It is a hit which does paralyze when they do so.
It's just called claws.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
fair enough. I'm thinking of the Lich thing.
The Lich has paralyzing touch.
Yeah, basically when they hit you, they have a chance to paralyze you, which is terrifying at all levels. Because if you make a bad throw, all of a sudden the hits crit you, which is just terrifying.
Really terrifying. This cannon fodder you thought you could ignore just lost you the fight. So like, they're just great for that reason.
Little snowbally.
Since we've really focused on skeletons, let's just stay on the skeletal theme and then double back for ghosts.
Yeah, sure.
So the next skeleton we jump to, we're jumping from I'm a skeleton to it's just a skull now. We have downgraded. The body's gone. It's just a skull. In fact, it is
Which
a
means it's
flame
weaker.
skull. Yeah, and of course it
Right?
means it's weaker. No, flame skulls are hilarious and horrifying enemies. They're literally just floating skulls that are on fire. They have like green fire that comes off their head. They're just like, and that's just what they are. And they are terrifying. Their challenge rating is 4. They're technically CR4. These creatures are so powerful for their level. Yeah. It is off the chain. So first, they have access to the fireball spell, which is just amazing. And then secondly, they have magic missile, which if you know the spell magic missile, you're thinking, that's not like that strong, right? The problem is late in the game, characters are level like 18. And what's an appropriate fight? A dozen flame skulls. And then you get hit with a dozen fireballs. And the game's just like, and the players are just like, wait, what? It's like, you get hit with a dozen fireballs. We're all dead.
The DM finally gets to feel the satisfaction of casting Fireball when they're used to their players using that overpowered spell. Now they get to do it on their players, and the DM cackles behind their screen.
Now, I'm not telling you to do that, because that is a lot of bullshit.
Yeah,
to players.
don't actually do that.
12 fireballs. But flame skulls are just incredibly menacing enemies for how unassuming they seem. They make excellent traps because they just hide in plain sight. It's just a skull.
That was what
they don't have to always be on fire.
That was going to be what I was going to say, was that the flame skull, it almost feels even more like a trap to me than it does a monster, where they just walk past a skull on like a laboratory bookshelf and they ignore it, and then the skull comes to life and throws a fireball at them, does a ton of damage, and then they kill it in one round. It's like a really weirdly elaborate arrow trap that shoots fire.
I mean, I particularly like flame skulls because they're just a skull, so you can put them and hide them anywhere. Like, there's a flame skull in that barrel. Like, sure, all right, flame skull in the barrel. What, the necromancer put a flame skull in a barrel? What are you doing about it? Pile of hay?
Maybe you should look in the barrel. It worked out really well for him, it seems, because you didn't see it.
Yep. There's a campfire. Guess what's in the campfire? It's a flame skull. One of the things that's actually incredibly menacing about flame skulls that a lot of people don't know, they reform. They actually, like, you didn't know that, did you?
No, I did know that one, actually.
See, that's a little known fact about flame skulls.
I heard that from you.
Is if you haven't sprinkled holy water on them specifically, or the dispel curse or remove curse or dispel magic, I think also works. But if you don't sprinkle holy water on them, they reform with all of their hit points in 1 hour. Party kill the flame skull, continues adventuring, goes to take a short rest, and gets ambushed by a flame skull. And they're like, what the fuck, man? Let's take another short rest. And then at the end of that short rest, they watch the flame skull just kind of put itself back together, and it's just, no, not again.
Liminiera asks, can you grab a flame skull and take it with you? And then
oh my god, I've got such a story about this. But
I guess my answer to that question is, how well have you rolled? Well, Jeremy, please.
I was going to say, let's bump up to Big Papa Flame Skull. He lost the fire, but he's still just a skull. We've gone from skeleton to flaming skull to just a regular skull. But this regular skull is the scariest.
They have like gems in their eyes or something like that.
Yes, they generally have gems in their eyes. And it is the Demi-Lich. The Demi-Lich is, in its lore, it is a lich that has kind of gotten starved of souls. They're generally actually more powerful than liches, though, which is a little weird. But so there's a lot we could talk about Demi-Liches. I don't think it's worth getting into detail because we're going to talk a lot about liches later.
Yeah.
But one of the things that Demi-Liches have, and a couple of undead have this, like the Banshee, is they have a scream ability that if you hear their scream and you fail a saving throw, you just die. You're just reduced to 0 hit points and you're dying, which is terrifying, no matter what. It's just absolutely, it's horror. It's just, I'm gonna die. It's incredibly menacing. It's super dramatic. And I have a story I just want to talk. I know I've been talking for a while, Pete. I'll let you jump in with the spoopy ghost. But
yeah, I was going to do the ghost next, actually. Cool.
With the Demi-Lich, I was playing in a game once, a campaign, where we ended up fighting a Demi-Lich. And we were level like 16, so we were like pretty high level. And this Demi-Lich screamed. And of our 5 people in the party, 4 of us went down. Except for the Paladin. And on the Paladin's turn, maybe 3 of us went down. A whole ton of us went down. Yeah, 3 of us went down, and like our NPC, who was like level 7, didn't go down. And the Paladin took his turn to just grapple the Demi-Lich and run away. And he just soloed the Demi-Lich from like the other room a ways back the dungeon, while this crappy NPC went about trying to get everyone else from being dead. And it was just such a fucking hero moment. That Paladin came within an inch of death, but it was such a dramatic.
I was gonna say that sounds pretty epic.
Because like we were like when all of us went down, all the player characters went down. It's over. GG.
Yeah,
but
to say I tend to shy away from the word epic, but that's what that sounds like. It was actually just epic.
It was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, Demi-Liches make cool enemies.
Demi-Liches are cool. Let's talk. And along the same lines, I don't think there's actually much more to say about the Banshee, other than that it also has that big AoE move where it reduces everyone to 0 health, which is rad and it's good at any level. It's like a lower level Demi-Lich that you can get that same feeling without just destroying them afterwards.
But just make sure if you're going to use those infrequently. Flame Skulls, Banshees, Demi-Liches, those shouldn't be enemies you just are always fighting. Those make like incredibly dramatic like pinnacles to a fight. A Banshee is the pinnacle to the fight in the haunted house or the shipwreck that you're exploring or something like that.
But not every encounter. That stuff can get very old very quick if it's
Don't use those as random encounters. They're bad random encounters.
Especially, I guess all of them are bad. But so yeah, let's talk about another one. Let's talk about another classic, the Ghost. I think it was a while ago I saw Luminieron mentioned that it feels like Ghost is the most OP because they aren't physical. Yes, that is definitely true. Ghosts are very terrifying for that reason, along with a lot of the other incorporeals, such as the Banshee, there's the Spectre, the Wraith, the Shadow. All of these creatures are just, they don't have physical forms. They're just wisps that can kind of float in and out of the material plane. They can go through walls. They can move easily and undetected, which makes them a really unique and interesting threat, just mechanically, because in order to hurt a ghost, you need to either have a weapon that's specifically designed to fight them, a magic weapon of some kind, or you'll just hit them with your regular sword and do a significantly lower amount of damage. Half damage, as the official kind of case may be. But there's a lot more to specifically, I'm going to be talking about the ghost a lot here. There's a lot more to a ghost than that because, as we were alluding to earlier, a ghost is what they are in your kind of collective minds. Like what you think of as a ghost is how they've been represented in D&D. They are a creature that is kind of a lost soul that has been left with unfinished business and now just kind of wanders haunting a particular location or area, trying to either eke out some kind of revenge for that or complete this unfinished business, which is a really cool tool for storytelling. Deciding what that is, what that task that they have been left behind is the perfect way to just use a ghost. You move into, for example, the obvious choice, the haunted house, the haunted manor where a ghost still kind of roams the halls. There are a million stories you can tell about that ghost. I'm sure you've already, in the time that I've been talking about it, thought of one that you might use for your own ghost. But the players then have this fun kind of encounter over the course of this haunted mansion dungeon crawl. They can be looking at things around them, learning tidbits about this creature, and maybe have the opportunity to not just defeat this enemy, but save this enemy, to get redemption for this lost soul and this lost creature, which is just a really cool and unique style of fight that the Ghost lets you do. And they also have a lot of other cool mechanics, like possessing people and going through walls and doing kind of spooky, scary stuff. But there's all kinds of stuff there. Jeremy, got anything on Ghosts? I went for a while there.
Well, did you talk about their possession, Pete?
I did. I said that they had it, but I didn't say what it did.
So possession is one of the coolest core features that the Ghost in particular has, in that the Ghost can go inside of the body of another character. It could be a player character, it could be an NPC, and control them. And exactly, could a Ghost possess a player? They have that exact ability, Luminarian. And it is amazing, because what do you do? What do you do when your party member just turns and starts slashing you with his sword? Or your your wizard's eyes glow red, and she turns to you and casts a fireball just on the party. Like, how do you react to that? Do you
cut your allies, the flame skull?
Right. Do you murder your party member because they were possessed by a ghost? And if you do, what's to stop the ghost from just possessing another person after? This ties back to that very nuanced fighting kind of more strategy, technical kind of like, how are you going to deal with this? It's almost the fight is a puzzle. Which is awesome. It's just really cool. I mean, I've seen some pretty ridiculous solutions to a ghost. I've seen players all like tie themselves up so that if they got possessed by the ghost, they like
what? I'm doing the math in my head on that one, Jeremy.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how
it was weird. It didn't work, but I've seen it.
Didn't seem like it would.
I think I did it. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, it can be a really fun solution. And that's another one of those situations where your cleric and paladin can really shine, because their turn undead feature gets rid of the possession, which is just a really cool, like, my hero moment, begone, evil spirit. And it's just dramatic and fun and cool. Ghosts are pretty cool. But so are all of the incorporeal kind of spirit undead. I mean, the Banshee is a very classic creature for the same kind of deal.
They all have their own cool things. There's the shadow, which is literally just a shadow on the ground. And they have an ability that drains people's strength, which instead of dealing damage, or actually, do they also deal damage, or is it just the strength?
No, it also deals damage.
Yeah,
I just had a player get annihilated by shadows last Saturday.
Which every time it hits you, all of a sudden you do less damage. Your strength is lowered, so it's even harder to fight it. And it's monstrous. It's also just a very cool aesthetic where you imagine just like your own shadow kind of growing, and it turns into this strange spirit. And there's the wraiths, there's poltergeists, there's all sorts of fun undeads.
I mean, wraiths are particularly cool because they can, when a wraith kills someone and they're dead, like dead, the wraith can, as one of their actions, turn them into a specter, which is just an incredibly like, oh my god, no, like dramatic moment. Right? It was bad enough that your ally died, but then their soul was twisted and warped to fight against. Just like brutal moment in a lot of games. But
that's kind of the gist of the incorporeal undead.
There are a couple of really cool material undead too.
I wanted to do the Revenant next, if you're down for that.
Yeah, I figure let's just go up by challenge rating. So let's start with Revenant.
The Revenant's radical. For anyone unaware of... That's the end. We can move on.
Revenants are like ghosts. They also have unfinished business. But Pete, their unfinished business is a little different, right?
Indeed it is, Jeremy. The Revenant's unfinished business. I said undead business. I guess it's also that. The Revenant's unfinished business is they have someone or some group or something that they hate. And they have sworn essentially, their hatred has been so great that they will never rest until the thing that they hate is dead. And so a revenant is just a super powerful sort of. Are they more zombie or more ghost? They feel kind of in betweenish to me personally.
I've seen revenants used in a couple different ways. They're almost like part ghost, part zombie. They're like Jason, right? I think Jason's actually a great example. Jason Voorhees is a great example of like what a revenant is. They're just unyielding, and they will just come at you nonstop. You kill them, they'll come back, and they will not stop coming back until you're dead.
They're an incredible recurring villain. You kill the revenant, you desecrate it, it just rematerializes elsewhere and hunts you down wherever you are. I think another ability that the revenant has is that the thing that a revenant hates, the revenant always knows the location of that thing. Yep. It can always find you. I think with the caveat that you're on the same plane.
Exactly. The revenant will always. You cannot hide from the revenant. Also, the revenant does a bunch of extra damage to you if it hates you in particular. So, like, revenants I love to use in campaigns when, like, you have a very morally gray party early on where they're doing, like, some good things, some bad things, and then they do something really bad. And maybe it's an accident. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like, for example, right, there's a dragon has been harassing this guy's farm, right? And it's been a wormling has been harassing this dude's farm. It's been taking his pigs. And he's like, you gotta go stop the wormling because he's taking my pigs. And the party decides, oh, we're going to set a trap. And the party sets a trap for the wormling. And when the wormling shows up, they botch the trap. The wormling sets the guy's house on fire, just freaking out, trying to escape. The house burns down. The guy's daughter, like, burns to death. And then the guy ends up dying to the dragon. And that dude comes back and haunts the shit out of you as a revenant. And he just does not stop because he came to you for help. And you got his family. Right?
And that example is cool for, a couple of reasons. One, because there's this enemy that's now just pursuing them. And two, is because every time they see this revenant, they're reminded, we really did an awful thing to this person. Like, that's also just a reminder of that immoral thing that they did, which is kind of a double effect there. So it's a very cool monster.
Yeah, I love the Revenant. I had I recently ran some Revenants. I say recently, it was a while ago now, but I had a really high level rogue who just hated wizards. And I gave him some really OP magic items, so he just murdered all the wizards that were in this town.
Jesus.
He was a dick. He just killed all of them. The character was a dick. The player was fine. And the wizards were also dicks. They kind of had it coming. But what I ended up doing later in the game is I had all of the wizards come back as revenants that just wanted to just mess that one character up. So there was just a bunch of undead muscle wizards just punching the crap out of them. And it was just a ton of fun. It was very, like, at first it was like, it's the dumb wizards and they're undead muscle wizards. Oh, it's funny. And then he, like, nearly died in the first round. It's like, this isn't funny anymore. I'm really scared. Why don't I kill all these wizards?
I mean, that sounds like a pretty goofy one.
It's a good comic relief, but it can be cool.
The Revenant is also, if taken, the Revenant can be really radical. Let's talk about Will-O-Wisps because
okay.
I don't know if we're gonna have time because we only got 10 minutes and we got to hit Vampire, Will-O-Wisp, and Lich, and I really want to do Will-O-Wisp.
Hit it.
All right, Will-O-Wisps are radical. I keep saying radical because it's true. They are essentially just points of light, is what they appear to players as. When you're walking through a dark forest late at night, you might see floating white lights, these strange kind of disembodied spirits that just drift and flit through the trees. And what they actually are just souls of lost spirit that essentially want to drag other people down with them. But looking at them, they're beautiful and they're very ethereal and they ask a lot of questions just by their presence. Like, what are they? They'll tend to lead people into dangerous and terrifying situations, acting like guide points and lampposts in the darkness. There are a lot of very cool and very atmospheric things that you can do with these will-o-wisps, just kind of slowly guiding the players into these dangerous situations. And that's cool on, well, just from an encounter standpoint, the players are now presented with this choice when they see these strange things they don't understand, asking them to go somewhere. Do we follow? If they do, well, odds are they probably regret it because the will-o-wisp is probably leading them somewhere they don't want to go. But if they don't, they might also regret it because it's, what if those things had been good? What if they were leading us somewhere important or interesting? So there's that lingering question of how. And a will-o-wisp is kind of a chaotic creature. So even though it is malevolent, it may not necessarily always act in a malevolent way. It may not go out of its way to like really just try and, like, if you come across them in the wild, they may not just jump up on you and just all attack you at once. That's probably not how a will-o-wisp will act.
Yeah, and there are a lot of cool ways that you can run will-o-wisps, right? They don't have to necessarily just be floating motes of light. A great example in popular media, for those familiar with The Lord of the Rings, the lights in the Dead Marshes are will-o-wisps. Like, that is a will-o-wisp. These just lights under the water. Like, that is perfect. That lure you to fall into the swamp. Like,
exactly.
Quintessential will-o-wisp. You can even do, like, they don't have to even be evil. They're the kind of creature where, yes, they're chaotic evil by the book, but you can have more good will-o-wisps that can't speak. And so it's oftentimes something that players are confused. They see these little glowing lights and they wonder, because a lot of players aren't familiar with them. And they can be whimsical, they can be playful, or they can be, well, deadly. And this is a tactical aspect we wanted to mention about these, because the will-o-wisps have one of the most terrifying abilities in the game. And I mean that with no small emphasis. Like, it's terrifying.
Absolutely.
They have an ability called Consume Life. And that is when a will-o-wisp sees a creature within 5 feet of it that is at 0 hit points and still alive, so unconscious, stabilized, dying, rolling death saves, whatever, the will-o-wisp can attack them, basically, can force them to roll a saving throw or instantly die. It can just drain their life from this dying creature. And that is an ability that is really threatening. Even though the DC is low, everyone can fail. Like, even the best character can roll a 2.
A bad roll. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
like, even a very, very high level character, like a level 20 wizard, you know, they might still just roll a 4 or 5 on their die and fail and die. And they're a level 20 character.
Yeah. And then Luminarian, so then they'd be dead forever. Yeah, exactly. If you died to this ability from Will-o'-the-Wisp, you would be just dead and gone, unless, you know, your party had some ability to resurrect or otherwise bring you back. You would be dead. Which brings an interesting question of using that, because that ability is extremely threatening and can build a very dramatic encounter, but not if they don't understand what the Will-o'-Wisp does. If a player just all of a sudden has that happen to them, I think in a lot of ways that player is going to feel cheated. Like, they were downed and making death saving throws, and it's essentially like this creature has all of a sudden just subverted a part of the game that no one even knew could be subverted up until this point. Just skipping the death saving throw process with this extra save. So when you're using something that has this kind of ability, it's just a question of being very careful with it. Perhaps a really just simple way to get around this is have someone else in the party, like an NPC or just some other creature at the scene, that the players get to see this happen to. They see them go down and then have their soul drain, so they understand this risk. And if they do get that, then you have this really dramatic moment, maybe in the middle of this fight, where they see this happen to someone other than themselves, where they're like, oh wow, we cannot make a mistake against these creatures. If we go down against these creatures, we just die. And that will just all of a sudden add a ton of tension to your combat. But when it just kind of gets sprung on someone, that can be a little bit. I think a lot of the times that will have someone leave your table with some kind of bad feelings about the way the encounter went.
But yeah, having ways to kind of project how those abilities work is super important. Like what you're saying, having an NPC take the hit is a really easy and obvious way to just force it. Having another encounter happen beforehand, like let's say they're going to run into Will-O-Wisp, and instead you say, oh, they're going to run into a grizzly bear, and they kill the grizzly bear, they knock it unconscious. You make a point to say the grizzly bear is dying, and then you have the Will-O-Wisp show up and kill the grizzly bear. Just and like emphasize that it shrivels and dies, right? The bleeding out creature is just instantly killed. And this is a way to just project and show these creatures can fuck you up if you're dying. Maybe there's an old like, a grandmother or grandfather on their rocking chair by the house out by the forest, and they have their crossbow and their beware the floating lights, they feed upon the dying, or whatever, just some ominous kind of whisper that they say, and then maybe they disappear, right? Maybe they're a ghost in their own right. And it can add to that kind of dramatism.
And that's just, I'm picturing a really cool scene now where they see a Will-O-Wisp. They've like gotten to know Will-O-Wisp, and then this kind of figure comes toward them carrying the lantern, who they assume is another Will-O-Wisp. In like the darkness of the thing with the source of light from the lantern. Anyway, really cool enemy. A lot to talk about with them. But yeah, just be careful with
radical
abilities even like that one. So we have two really iconic undead that we're moving into without a ton of time left.
I think we'll just super briefly just say vampires are cool undead. They're the core protagonist to the Curse of Strahd adventure with Vampire Lord Strahd von Zarovich. More than anything else, vampires can be used as the charismatic undead, the quintessential charismatic undead. Unlike all the other ones, vampires are super high on the charisma chain. Charisma train. They will charm you. They will dominate you. They will control you with their charm and allure. And they make menacing enemies for it. They got a lot of really cool abilities that, Pete and I could do an episode on vampires.
Yeah. Vampires are awesome. And I'm sure that I think one thing about vampires is that there's enough said about them in other media that you probably already have a good idea of how vampires work as well.
Their weaknesses, their nuances, that's all manifested in the game, and it's cool.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Lich. We have talked about the Lich a little bit. Oh no, sorry. It was a little bit, but then I just decided to go. All right. We don't have a ton of time. The Lich is my number one favorite villain in D&D. I think they're like the penultimate, the quintessential villain of Dungeons and Dragons. There are, without getting into their abilities too much, they're undead. They are immortal as long as their soul exists within a thing that they call a phylactery, which is just some object that the Lich has kind of spirited away their soul into, and they reform at that if they are killed. Sort of like the kind of closest thing to it would probably be Voldemort's Horcruxes, if you're familiar with the series of Harry Potter. They are spellcasters. They're very much high level. I think most of the mythos for most liches is that there are high level wizards that have tried to ascend to this lich form to obtain either even greater power, but that always comes at a price, being it their sanity, their form, or something else. That is kind of what a lich is, but what makes a lich incredible is deciding what your lich is. There are so much. I see Bionic Shiva saying Art Dragon is the quintessential enemy of Dungeons and Dragons. Is what I say to that. I say, maybe. But I think the Lich is a cooler enemy, if nothing else. There's so many choices about what you can do. Yes. choosing what spells. Like, they give you a baseline of spells, but you can make your lich anything that you want. You can be a fire lich that just gives them all sorts of fire moves, or you can theme that however you want. There's just endless. I mean, I just going into liches in such a short time. Jeremy, anything really big about liches?
One of the best things about the liches, going back to what Pete said, the phylactery, and why liches make such excellent enemies. And this is something I see done wrong almost every time I see people play against liches in games. And that is the lich's phylactery. Liches are hyper-intelligent creatures. These are wizards that have gone to absolute inhuman levels of intelligence and have been able to give themselves eternal life. It doesn't matter what happens in the fight against the Lich. You might kill the Lich, you might defeat him, and maybe you loot that temple. But a smart Lich, their phylactery isn't there. Where it is, God only knows. Who's to say it's even on this plane? It could be literally anywhere. It could be in a demi-plane somewhere. Like, it literally could be anywhere. And a lot of dungeon masters, you know, the enemy, the good guys defeat the Lich, and they explore, and oh look, it's the phylactery. And you don't have to do that. The Lich becomes an enemy not that just that the enemies that the players defeat. They defeat it,
and then
but it comes back. They have forestalled the inevitable. In defeating a Lich, you may have set back his plans 100 years. But that Lich is coming back. And when it does, hopefully either you're still around or someone is still around to fight it again. It's not a complete victory. It's a Pyrrhic victory at best. And I like that. I like the kind of, yeah, we won. We defeated the Lich. Only 2 of us died. Yeah. But
you didn't get the phylactery.
At what cost?
Yeah.
You bought some years. You bought some time while he reforms. I say he. They reform. But it's not over. It's never over. And that's kind of, I think, a core tenet of this game, right? The battle between good and evil doesn't end. It's forever. There will always be evil and there will always be good. And both will always try and eradicate the other, but it'll never happen. And the Lich is the high-level quintessence of that, which is just, I don't know, I think it's really cool. I hid my phylactery under a rock in the ocean somewhere. Like, really?
I was going to say, you ended on such a cool note, Jeremy. But then
I hit the nail on the head. I hit my phylactery under a rock in the ocean somewhere. Good luck, buddy.
But since we're on that subject, we can, in that case, answer Max Muncher's question. Why not an undead dragon? Just a dragon made out of bones. It's in the monster manual. It's called a Draco Lich, which is a dragon that has become a lich, which is maybe that, Shiva, is the most iconic thing. Because it's a combination of both the Lich and the dragon.
The lore behind it's a little different. We're not going to talk about that because that's Forgotten Realms stuff, but it's still real cool. Yeah. We got Paper Towel 17 asking in chat. I know it's off topic, but I have a question on clerics on 2 different pantheons. If we have any deity experts in the chat. I mean, feel free to post a comment, Paper Towel. If someone's aware, I'm sure we'll be willing to chime in. We've got some Dungeons and Dragons experts here, I'd say.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, let's just wrap it back up.
Yeah, let's call it a day. Thank you very much to everyone who tuned in and to everyone who tuned in and hung out and talked about some D&D stuff with us tonight. I love Undead. They're cool. I don't love them quite as much as monsters, but that doesn't mean I don't love them a whole lot.
Yeah, Undead, I think, more than anything else, make the best ongoing nemesis in an adventure or in a campaign, especially a long-term campaign. And I mean, you could run an entire game just with undead, and that can't be said for, I think, any other creature type. That in its own right says something.
I think the only other one might be humanoids.
Okay, you're right. There's a second one.
Humanoids too. Which then we should do humanoids for the next one if we're going to continue on this path.
Good. Yeah. I was saying dragon. I was thinking dragon.
I feel like there's not actually that much to talk about with dragons.
I think there's a lot to talk about different types of dragons, Pete.
If we want to
take
go over
what the different types of dragons are like, but not everyone.
I mean,
knows.
that's fair. We could go
into
what?
Chat,
we'll figure it out.
Let us know. Let us know what you want to see. Do you want to see us talk about the different types of dragons? Do you want to see us talking about different types of humanoids, like goblins and goblinoid creatures, and you want tea and those kind of things?
Elves.
Do you want us to talk about fire newts exclusively and nothing else? Let us know. Preferably not that one. I don't want to talk about exclusively.
I think we're doing just fire newts.
Just fire newts forever?
Yeah, if there's another one that you really want to see. Yeah, well, that's it for DnDTime Talks. From this point on, it's DnDTime Fire Newts.
Fire newts.
Maybe.
Yep, confirmed. Just a couple quick announcements before we end it off tonight. Don't forget, Friday, to tune in to Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time. We'll be announcing our players tomorrow morning. So it should be a lot of fun. I've got some sweet adventures that we're going to figure out for this week. I'm pretty stoked. I'm always stoked. It's going to be great. And Sunday, tune in for D&D Time Brews, where Pete and I guess we're going to be brewing some beasts. Maybe not beasts specifically, but we're going to be brewing up some monsters.
Brewing some beastie boys.
I don't know. We could do some cool stuff with that. I haven't really thought too much about that, but Pete and I will convene in the meantime. Maybe we can get you some more deets if we have some stuff in particular. Or maybe we'll just put out some ideas like we do with the magic items, right? And have the chat kind of vote on which ones we all want to tackle. That could be cool. That could be real cool. Huh.
But
anyway,
we'll as we think about this and decide what we're going to do.
We also have a special announcement that will only be announced on Sunday. Some special content we'll be putting out for you guys. So we hope you like it when we release it. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
For more.
I think we can, without saying what it is, I think we can at least say, like, we made something outside of brews that we would normally have done in brews, but it's just an extra thing. So you got a free brew without the brewing process.
A free brew for D&D time would be pretty rad. Anyway,
beats.
I'm Jeremy,
and I'm Pete, and this is
D&D Time Talks. Take care, everyone.